The rain was falling softly that evening, the kind that makes streets shine like quiet mirrors under fading city lights. But something strange happened at that lonely bus stop that nobody there would ever forget afterward. A little girl suddenly walked up to a young homeless woman sitting silently on the bench. And what she said next made every person nearby freeze in disbelief and confusion. "You need a home, and I need a mommy," the little girl whispered gently. Now imagine standing there, hearing those words from such a tiny voice. You'd probably wonder what kind of story led to that heartbreaking moment. Well, tonight, my friends, I want you to sit back and listen carefully. Because this story begins with loneliness, but it might just end with something beautiful. And trust me, by the end of this, your heart might feel a little different. It was a chilly afternoon when the city buses kept arriving and leaving one after another. People hurried past each other, carrying worries, groceries, and long exhausting workdays. But one person at the bus stop looked different from everyone else standing there. She was a young woman wearing an oversized coat that clearly didn't belong to her. Her shoes were worn out, and her hair looked like it hadn't been brushed for days. Yet her eyes held something unusual, something gentle, almost like quiet kindness hiding behind pain. Most people avoided looking directly at her as they walked by quickly. Some pretended not to notice the small bag sitting beside her tired feet. Inside that bag were probably all the belongings she had left in the world. And still, she sat there calmly, watching buses come and go without saying anything. Across the street, a father and his little daughter were also waiting quietly. The girl couldn't have been older than 6 years old, maybe even younger. She held her father's hand tightly while swinging her small backpack behind her shoulders. But instead of watching the road like everyone else waiting for their ride, her curious eyes kept drifting back toward the young homeless woman on that bench. Children have a strange way of noticing things adults pretend not to see. They don't always understand the world, but sometimes they understand hearts better. The father checked his phone repeatedly, unaware his daughter had started walking slowly away. Step by step, the little girl crossed the sidewalk toward the silent stranger. And within seconds, something unforgettable was about to happen. The homeless woman noticed small footsteps stopping right in front of her tired shoes. She slowly lifted her head, confused about why a child was standing there alone. The little girl looked at her with wide, curious eyes full of innocent courage. For a moment neither of them said anything while the wind rustled nearby trees softly. Then the girl spoke with a voice so gentle it almost sounded like a secret. "You look like someone who needs a home," she said without fear or hesitation. The young woman blinked in surprise, unsure if she had heard correctly. Before she could respond, the little girl added something even more unexpected. "And I need a mommy, because mine went to heaven last year." Those words hung in the air like a fragile moment nobody wanted to break. The young homeless woman felt her chest tighten in a way she couldn't explain. It had been years since anyone had spoken to her with that much honesty. Most people treated her like invisible dust blowing across crowded sidewalks. But this little girl was looking directly into her eyes without judgment or fear. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words refused to come out. Not because she didn't have something to say, but because emotion suddenly overwhelmed her. Meanwhile, the father had finally noticed his daughter standing near the stranger. He rushed forward quickly, worried about what his child might have done. "I'm so sorry," he said nervously, gently pulling the girl back beside him. But what happened next surprised him just as much as everyone watching nearby. The little girl resisted slightly and held the homeless woman's hand softly. "Daddy, wait," she said firmly with a seriousness unusual for someone so young. She looked sad the same way Mommy looked before she got very sick. The father froze for a moment, clearly unsure how to respond to that statement. He looked toward the young woman and noticed the tears quietly forming in her eyes. There was no anger there, no discomfort, just deep sadness mixed with gratitude. "I didn't mean to bother you," the woman finally whispered quietly. "I was just waiting for the rain to stop before finding somewhere warm tonight." Her voice sounded calm, but it carried years of exhaustion and loneliness. Something about that moment made the father hesitate before walking away. The bus they had been waiting for suddenly pulled up beside the curb loudly. Passengers began stepping inside while the driver glanced impatiently at the small crowd. The father looked at the bus door, then back at the homeless woman sitting alone. His daughter tugged his sleeve gently with hopeful eyes searching his face. "Daddy, please," she whispered, "she shouldn't sleep outside when it's this cold." Those words struck him harder than he expected deep inside his heart. For months he had struggled raising his daughter alone after losing his wife. Loneliness had quietly become a permanent guest inside their small apartment. And suddenly this strange moment at a bus stop felt strangely meaningful. The father took a slow breath and made a decision he never expected. He turned toward the young homeless woman with cautious kindness in his voice. "Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight?" he asked carefully. She shook her head slowly, clearly embarrassed by the honesty of that answer. "I usually find a shelter or stay on buses until morning," she admitted quietly. The little girl squeezed her father's hand harder as she listened closely. "Daddy, we have an extra chair at the dinner table," she reminded him softly. The father looked down at his daughter, then back at the woman again. Life rarely gives people clear instructions about moments like this one. But sometimes the simplest acts of kindness become the most important choices. And standing there, he realized maybe helping her might help them too. "Well, we were about to go home for dinner," he said carefully. "It's nothing fancy, just soup and sandwiches after a long day." The young woman looked stunned, unsure whether she heard him correctly. "You're inviting me?" she asked quietly, disbelief filling every word she spoke. The father nodded slowly, though uncertainty still flickered in his eyes. "My daughter seems convinced you belong somewhere warmer than this bus stop tonight." The little girl smiled proudly as if her plan had worked perfectly. For the first time in days, the homeless woman felt warmth spread through her chest. Not from food or shelter, but from simple human kindness offered without expectation. And sometimes that kind of warmth can change everything. They walked together through quiet streets glowing beneath soft yellow streetlights. The little girl skipped ahead happily while holding both their hands tightly. Strangers passing by probably assumed they were simply a small family heading home. None of them could guess how unusual that evening truly was. Inside the modest apartment, the smell of warm soup filled the kitchen instantly. The woman sat nervously at the table, unsure how to act in such kindness. But the little girl talked non-stop, asking questions and sharing stories happily. Her laughter slowly filled spaces that had felt empty for months. The father watched quietly, noticing something peaceful returning to the room again. It had been a long time since their home felt this alive. During dinner, the young woman finally shared pieces of her difficult past. She explained how losing her parents forced her into shelters and endless wandering. Life had been a series of temporary places, never truly belonging anywhere. But sitting there at that table felt different from anything she remembered before. The little girl listened closely as if every word mattered deeply to her. "You see, Daddy," she said proudly, "I told you she needed a home." The father chuckled softly while shaking his head at his daughter's determination. Sometimes children understand solutions adults complicate with fear and doubt. And in that warm kitchen, something hopeful quietly began growing between strangers. Not a perfect solution, but the beginning of something meaningful. Days slowly turned into weeks as the young woman stayed temporarily with them. She helped cook meals, cleaned the apartment, and walked the girl to school daily. What began as kindness slowly turned into something resembling a real family routine. Neighbors started greeting her like someone who belonged in the building. The little girl laughed more often than she had since losing her mother. And the father realized the silence in their home had quietly disappeared. Life still had challenges, bills, responsibilities, and difficult memories that remained. But suddenly those burdens felt lighter when shared between caring hearts. Sometimes families are not built by blood but by compassion and courage. And this unlikely family was slowly discovering exactly that truth together. One evening months later, the little girl hugged the young woman tightly. "See," she whispered happily, "I told you we both needed each other." The father stood nearby smiling, realizing how one unexpected bus stop moment changed everything. What started as a stranger sitting alone in the rain had become something beautiful. A home that once felt empty now echoed with laughter, warmth, and shared dinners. And it all began with the honesty of a brave little girl's heart. Sometimes the most powerful changes come from the smallest voices among us. So next time you pass someone who seems invisible to the world around them, remember that kindness, even small kindness, can rewrite someone's entire life story. And who knows, it might just rewrite yours too. If this story touched your heart even a little today, let me know. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in that moment. Would you have walked away, or opened your door to someone needing hope? Stories like this remind us that compassion still exists in our world. And if you enjoy powerful stories that make you think and feel deeply, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who loves meaningful stories. Your support helps bring more incredible stories like this to life. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next story. Until then, stay kind, stay curious, and keep believing in unexpected miracles.